Many people expect that this Friday's First Ministers gathering in Ottawa will focus on jump-starting regional economies. No doubt premiers will have wish lists for cash to spend on their infrastructure projects. It's a huge opportunity for them as the Harper government prepares its budget for January the 27th. Some are concerned that talk of a new national securities regulator could distract from the main issues. Our radio blogger Ken Chapman is in to tell us what to expect. Ken is a lawyer and policy analyst with Cambridge Strategies in Edmonton. Happy New Year, Ken. Welcome back.
Same to you, Don.
Thanks very much. Well, what do you think the focus of this First Ministers meeting will be on Friday?
Well, I think the Prime Minister wants to make the focus primarily one of the budget and the infrastructure problems, and regional disparities be one of them. But the regional disparities that I think he's going to be most interested in are going to be in Quebec and Ontario, not necessarily those in Alberta.
And do you think this meeting is going to become just an ask meeting, an opportunity for the premiers to lobby for federal money for infrastructure projects?
It'll start that way, but I think it's been a very clear message out that the provinces have to participate too, and Alberta is clearly participating, in the asset-backed paper problems that we'd have to put some money up for. I think it was Ontario and Alberta and BC that helped the federal government put some into that area. Alberta's putting an awful lot of money into its own capital side, so Alberta's playing the game and doing it very well, but the problem is going to be is that where they see Alberta just as the headlines in the Edmonton Journal just said today, is it just a cash cow? We can ignore Alberta because they're rich and they don't need this kind of help. Well, there's lots of sectors in Alberta that are really seriously suffering.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, well, here's what Premier Ed Stelmach said yesterday about not taking the West for granted when it comes to our role in the Canadian economy and Alberta's needs.
Nobody will be able to afford to buy a car unless they have a job and some job security. And that means every other industry is important, forestry, agriculture, and oil and gas, because that's where the wealth is created. The wealth is what buys the car. You just don't support an auto industry and saying, well, here, we're going to give you some loan guarantees, and then keep your fingers crossed that they'll survive for a few more months without anybody buying any vehicles.
So there you go, Ken. And he's obviously saying that he's a little concerned that Ontario and Quebec might steal the show.
Well, I think that's a legitimate concern. He's talking about international internal trade as well, and Alberta and BC have done a lot in that area as well in terms of making the contribution. The other thing is the idea of a national security system that Alberta is very violently opposed to that because they see that simply as a wealth transfer. Alberta wants to be able to do its own kind of capital raising on its own terms within its own jurisdiction. And this could be as big as an NEP2 kind of crisis between Alberta and Ottawa, what's going on here. In fact, there's some very interesting parallels back to the Trudeau days almost, where you see Alberta and Quebec starting to align like Levesque and Lougheed did on provincial jurisdictional issues and respecting provincial jurisdiction. I think the Premier of Alberta is going to send a very strong message to the Prime Minister of Canada to say, I thought you were going to stay at a provincial jurisdiction. What is this all about?
How much do you think that could sideline talks at the First Ministers meeting?
I don't think it'll sideline the talks at the First Ministers meeting because the budget's coming up pretty quickly, and that's the major concern for everybody. But there's that issue, then there's the meeting with Obama, and the issue of climate change and oil sands and energy supply is going to be clearly in that meeting. Alberta obviously isn't appropriate to be at that meeting, but anything that follows up subsequently, the Premier's made it very clear that he wants to be participating. So I think there's a lot of tension that's going to start between Alberta and Ottawa again, and I think that Alberta is going to start flexing some muscle in this regard.
That's really interesting that you should put it that way, and I found your comments about the securities regulator very interesting indeed. I want to tell you and our listeners that the head of the Alberta Securities Commission, Bill Rice, is going to be a guest on our program tomorrow, and he's going to take listeners' calls about this because obviously this is an issue that isn't going away. But tell me a bit more about those tensions, because it's a new world, isn't it, when you've got tensions between Alberta and Ottawa, particularly when the Prime Minister is a Conservative who comes from the oil city in this province.
Well, and he comes from Alberta, exactly. It's almost getting to be the sense that it doesn't matter who's in Ottawa. Ottawa seems to be just Ottawa. And I think that there's an awful lot of anxiety and latent anger in the Progressive Conservative Party ranks about how this is being dealt with and how it's being handled. And I think that the budget is an issue. The national energy, it's going to be a national energy 2 thing coming over securities and jurisdiction. I think the environment, climate change, oil sands are going to be hot. And I just think I'm starting to see this is kind of back to the future again. Most of these things have some constitutional elements into them and jurisdictional elements. I'm thinking that Alberta politically is going to start getting very, very vocal on national issues and its own concerns.
And how much power do we have when it comes to arguing on our own behalf? I mean, given that we haven't suffered quite as much as some of the other regions of the country economically at this point, does that give us strength in our arguments?
Well, yeah, it does in the sense that if we're going to be doing infrastructure, there's an opportunity to make sure Alberta participates, brings up its responsibilities by making sure that we're not just asking Ottawa for everything. But I don't think Ottawa can ignore Alberta. That makes Albertans feel like they're second-class citizens, and that's when we start to see this alignment with Quebec. We're going to align with Quebec on the Security Commission kinds of issues, but we may start aligning with them on other issues in terms of jurisdiction. It was Prime Minister Harper that said he was going to respect provincial jurisdiction. This is a very, very strange way to show that.
How much support does Prime Minister Harper need from the First Ministers, the premiers of this country, as he prepares the budget for January the 27th?
I don't think he needs anything. I think what he really needs to do is to make sure that people read the Constitution and respect it. I think that the law is the law, and I think that that's where his position is going to be taken. I think we're going to find, if Alberta survives this recession, and quite frankly, on a gross basis, we will. People individually will suffer, but I think there's enough going on in Alberta, and there's enough residual momentum, even with postponed and canceled oil sands projects, that we should be able to make it through this pretty well and come out of the other end even stronger, because we've got no debt and deficit either. And so I think you're going to see another migration starting in Alberta in about 6 to 8 months.
Oh boy! What do you think is going to prompt that?
Oh, it's just because there's going to be more security here coming out of this recession. I don't think this recession it's not an off-on switch. It takes a long time to get out of it, and we've known we've been in it since August of '07. I mean, the Americans have been in recession for over a year. They finally admitted, and we're now starting to, it's a technical recession, sure, but the fact is that how dramatic and quickly all this has turned around, and we haven't seen the bottom of it yet, but. We're very vulnerable in terms of energy supply, commodity prices, the impact and the relationship between the energy sector and the environment, and we have some serious social problems in dealing with growth. We're starting to address all of those locally, and this infrastructure opportunity to build infrastructure is a bit of a breather, so we can do a really good job on this. Alberta will come out of this recession, I think, extremely strongly and with a very strong base, but we're going to have some pain going through it.
Ken Chapman, great to have your insights today. Thanks for joining us.
Good talking to you, Donna.
That's Ken Chapman. He's a lawyer and policy analyst with Cambridge Strategies in Edmonton. What do you think about his take on Ed Stelmach's trip to Ottawa? Are you concerned that the Prime Minister may be taking Alberta's interests for granted? Give our talkback line a call at 1-800-461-9219.